Oh, or I can.
Okay. Okay. Basically, the way that I'd like to do the introductions, I know everyone submitted a short bio, but I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and talk about how you entered the career, some of your background, and where you are now and how you got there. Benjamin, please go ahead.
I'm Ben Hendel. I graduated in 2017 from UC Davis, and I kind of got into the field by just being at a GIS day on campus. Oh, should I start my talk now?
Yes, please.
Okay, is it okay if I share screen?
Yes.
All right. All right. So yeah, like I said, I was in school. I kind of had just learned what GIS was. And in terms of the skill mix that I have, like people oftentimes talk about a skill mix as in the few things that you are uniquely good at that you combine that no one else can really have that specific skill mix. I kind of had these things. I had GIS, I had general statistics and data science, and I had music. Two of those a bit easier to combine. The third one, not really that related. And to this day, my musical career has brought me significantly less money than my GIS and data science career. But still, it's like a passion pursuit, and I kind of find a way to invest time into all of them. So I wanted to start off with a career move that kind of advanced them in some form. So I quickly noticed that the entry-level GIS roles, the really impactful ones, were in places that I didn't necessarily want to live. For example, Alabama, rural parts of Texas, and yes, Redlands. No offense, Lisa. I knew I wanted to stay in the area. I had the network of being in Silicon Valley, which was very powerful, and all these big tech companies were doing these big things. And one thing that these big tech companies have are kind of contracts related to mapping and GIS. So I decided to join one of those. You may have seen ads for them like GIS editor, GIS something. And my experience in that was interesting in that I had an amazing time, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But also there were cons that made me not want to work there for a while. For example, these are contract roles, and the chance of conversion to full-time is very, very slim. And while I learned a lot, what I learned was on proprietary GIS software. So it wasn't necessarily applicable to things once I was done. But I got to work with some incredible technology that I can't talk about, and get really cool perks and meet really amazing people. So after that, I kind of started doing all the GIS help that I could, as in random tasks. I was on email lists. I was on the Stanford Geospatial email list, and I found a bunch of things of people needing help. I helped the guy assess if solar panels are feasible in Bermuda. I helped a firm conduct analysis on energy sources in an infrastructure in like East Asia, in parts like Kazakhstan, where it was very poorly mapped, and I had to see like what percent of data already exists and if it can be scraped. And this sort of eventually landed me helping someone at a wireless consulting firm called 2020 Wireless. It's very small, and basically they help internet service providers and people building 5G and fiber and wireless cables basically plan and participate in auctions for rights for building. At the beginning, I did things like this. I made this Plotly map, very simple. You press the play button and it runs on all 6 rounds. And then it changes color based on how the auction is going. Then problems started to arise. I had to update it every day. It eventually became too big. Like after 70 something rounds, it just became to like a file that was like 2 gigabytes in size, and it was just unfeasible. So every task I did, I encountered new problems that I learned from. And this was a lot better in terms of my growth, in that I was continuously learning something new every day, and it was being I was being presented a different challenge. And it wasn't like, oh, here's the resources to do it, here's the help. It was like, no, this is what you need to do, and it has to look exactly like this. The difference between a big company and consulting is that the people there that give you tasks don't really understand the GIS aspect at all. You're just the guy, you're the one who is supposed to know, and there has to be an answer, and it's like you can't like explain your way out of it, which is like a very different contrast. But I thoroughly enjoy it, and now I've kind of escalated to doing more and more work for them. A lot of this has pushed me to work with tools like SQL databases, algorithms for traversing graphs, and seeing coverage of cell towers, like mathematical algorithms for what's the minimum number of cell towers you can place to cover a certain area with specific confidence, which is really interesting. And when I thought to myself, like, what am I providing as a service? Well, I'm kind of just the guy who does the GIS work and manages the spatial data. I like to think of what I do as working on QGIS, R, coding, all these things. But a lot of what I do is simply trying to understand if a task can be done, Googling a lot, and trying to do it. That's not part of my title, but that is what I do most of the time. Yes, that is QGIS. I did not pay for ArcGIS, and so far, I have not had a situation where I needed to use ArcGIS, interestingly. And I've learned to use QGIS. I've been scripting and automating with it, and it's been really interesting. So my concerns for the future are basically where I'm at now. What I'm thinking about for the future are what do I like? Like, I like being the GIS guy, but the trend I've noticed in the big companies for GIS is not to have a guy who does GIS work. It's instead to have like a huge distributed cloud team of maybe 100 people editing all over the world in Asia, and a lot of people just managing projects, looking at dashboards, writing code. And this is a bit of a conflict with what I like to do. I like kind of being the guy who is given these sort of problems and runs it locally on his machine and just figures it out. Another thing is, like, I have all these different interests. Like, how do I keep my resume experience? How do I like tailor it for my next experience? And like, where am I going in terms of specialization? I know a lot about 5G now, which is interesting. The network and roads part also is kind of speaks to me, so I may want to go in that direction. Alternatively, instead of specializing, what are my weaknesses? Like, my business skills are not great as my GIS skills. My artistic skills for maps are not very good. I'm more of a back-end person right now, and I don't really have the cartographic skills to make nice maps. That's something I may want to improve at. And kind of trying to figure out what my future job is going to be and what people do in those jobs in this day-to-day. And that's been surprisingly hard. It's very difficult to find someone to shadow and to really understand what the job is going to be unless I actually interview there or work there. Of course, finding job opportunities that aren't just randomly throwing your resume at online little resume job postings. Of course, building a network, dealing with self-criticism and imposter syndrome. Part of what I liked about working independently, just consulting remotely, is that you're kind of throwing projects quickly and you just kind of do it, and there's not really the time or the feedback phase of self-criticism. It's more just like, oh wow, I could do that. That was impressive. I liked what I did. I came up with something. Whereas at a big company, you're like, you feel sometimes as if like, oh, like, what's my role here? Do I really fit in? And of course, how do I help the world and deal with the problems that we are facing today? But overall, I think I've done a pretty good job for where I'm at. I've managed to balance my passions. For example, I've also been learning a lot of data science at the same time, and I've been writing music for movies, which has been like a fun passion project. And the quarantine and pandemic has given me a lot of time to improve in all those. So yeah, that's about it.
That's fantastic, Benjamin. Thank you so much. And I'm sure really inspirational for a lot of the students in early career
Of course.
participants that have been here, so thank you for your comments. And I love that you owned up to self-criticism and imposter syndrome, because we all have that, right? There's, especially in the geospatial world, there's a lot to know. Nobody knows all of it, but we can help each other. That's what this is about. So our next presenter will be Madison Draper from Stamen. Madison, could you go ahead and, there you are. Go ahead and start your presentation. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got where you are and what you're doing, and advice that you can offer to other early career professionals. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here. Let me show this tiny presentation I made. I think you can see my screen. Cool. So just a little bit about me, and I'll be talking about my life as a cartographer. I will give the caveat, though, that I'm a bit of I'm a very specific type of cartographer. I'm a digital cartographer, meaning that the maps that I create are very largely for, I don't know how to get rid of this, I'm sorry. They're web-based. I use a lot of kind of very digital platforms, and the maps are made to stay digital, and they're made mostly for kind of different kinds of applications. So print cartography, probably not the best to go to, but for very kind of digital and rendering, things like that, that's what I'll be talking about today. If I know how to switch the slide. Okay, cool. So a quick little bit of who I am. I graduated from UC Berkeley in the geography department and in American Studies in 2018, so just about 3 years ago. And then all these little kind of logo things on the bottom here, these aren't companies that I've worked for necessarily, but they are companies that I've had the opportunity to help create their maps for. Some of them you might recognize, some of them you might be kind of curious, like I didn't even know that they had a map. And that I think just kind of goes to show just like how important maps can be, and how critical spatial data is to all of these different industries. Even places that kind of you wouldn't think that they would have them, they really can be business critical. So when I was like looking for a job, I was really scared coming out with these kind of two random degrees. I didn't really know where I was going to work, but it turned out that a lot of people actually really use mapping software. I'm gonna look at the bullets that I have listed here. I'm skipping over where it says Mapbox, Bloomberg, and Stamen. These are 3 companies that I've worked at so far. Mapbox is the owner. I've had the opportunity to work with most of these companies. For those of you who don't know, Mapbox is a company that specializes in kind of just location services very broadly, everything from kind of the map rendering to interactive mapping, map design, to geocoding, navigation, etc. And then I did some contract work at Bloomberg and Stamen as well. For Bloomberg, for the maps you see kind of in their news articles, those are things that I was able to help out working on. And then for Stamen, it is a data visualization design studio with a really big focus on mapping. So there really are some really great niches and great people that you can work out for. And a lot of these roles that I've gotten have been through just kind of connections, which kind of go out of order here, but looping back up to where it says NACIS and State of the Map in my second bullet. These are some conferences that I've spoken at, and it was really scary. I spoke at both of these my first year right out of college. I just felt like I had a lot to say about mapping and kind of what else there is about digital mapping, especially, and that's where I made kind of a lot of really good colleagues, where I was able to kind of keep advancing my career as well. And then I'm listed Amazon here at the bottom, is that's kind of where I'm headed next in my career. I'll be starting there in a couple weeks or something. But yeah, there's definitely just a lot of companies that are actually really interested in kind of like the mapping field. And it's such an amazing kind of like a focus to have that can be really, really niche and make you stand out amongst other types of designers and engineers. So that's just a little bit about who I am. And then these next couple of slides will focus more on kind of what I actually do. So as a cartographer, I mostly stay in with just within a few tools that you see here: Mapbox Studio, Maputnik, Figma and Illustrator, but really the tools don't matter a whole bunch. My thought is that kind of anyone can learn how to use a tool. You can learn how to click buttons, play around with it, get familiar with it. But what's really kind of gonna make you stand out, and what I feel like has really helped me out, is being able to kind of understand the purpose behind the decisions that you're making when designing a map, and then being able to explain it even more. So if you feel like you're writing a lot of papers as a geography major, being able to explain that is actually really, really critical, and will help when you kind of go to talk to other people about the map. Because for a lot of these places, like I'm either the sole cartographer or working with very few cartographers, and then interacting mostly with engineers and product designers and PMs. People who don't speak map as fluently. So being able to kind of just translate that into something that makes a little bit more sense to people will get you really, really far. But at the same time, the mastery of tools, so it'll also be very helpful. This next slide, in addition to kind of understanding geography, understanding mapping, and all of that, it's also really important, at least it was for me, to understand how all of this works behind the scenes, to know what a shader is or a renderer, or to kind of understand why pins can only be put in certain places, or kind of what actually creates the different visualizations and the data types behind it. As you saw, I have two very like social science, humanities related degrees. And I didn't know like 3 lines of code in my last year of college. And I spent a lot of time kind of just learning how to create a web map, how to publish these things, how to actually use all the different like services, Leaflet, Mapbox, et cetera, and learn how to create my own maps and how to just learning how it works and how to kind of have intelligible conversations. I think ultimately going back to that, being able to communicate what you're trying to do and why you've made these decisions is going to be one of the most critical parts of being a cartographer, just because you are so specialized that you might have a smaller community in your personal workspace, but then when you go to bigger spaces like this, it's a lot of fun to be able to kind of have these conversations fluently. But yeah, the technical understanding is something that I definitely cannot emphasize enough. I am in no means like a super strong front-end developer, or do I know how to kind of make vector tiles myself, but I do understand how it works. And I think that is a good place, at least for kind of the work that I do, to have felt confident in what I'm doing and being able to kind of have those conversations. And my last slide, I have 3 kind of takeaway recommendations. The first one I just went over was kind of taking the time to understand the technical implementation, with just kind of also understanding that you don't have to know how it all works, but just be able to have a conversation about it. My second one is a little bit more product designy, since I kind of do fall in the in-betweens of that, is to really create the map as a user. Not as a cartographer. Creating a map as a cartographer can really lead you down some paths of perfectionism almost. And there's a lot of kind of conventions in cartography that aren't necessary exactly for kind of these more modern technical phase of sun mapping. Finding that balance can be really important. And then my last one is really just kind of do it for yourself. It's a lot of fun to be a digital cartographer. It is a bit of a lonesome at sometimes too. So just kind of remember why you're doing it and have fun with it. That's all that I have.
That's fantastic, Madison. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate your point. I think I'm seeing my screen on your screen there. If you can stop share. Thank you. The point about knowing the purpose of the map, knowing your audience, that's so important, that especially when we're making, let's say, a story map for advocacy, something like that. So I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, but if anyone has questions, feel free to take yourself off mute. We have a little extra time due to a scheduling snafu that I made and gave Lisa Berry 20 minutes instead of 10. So she's graciously offered to cut into some of her time with any questions from the attendees. Are there any questions? Feel free to put in chat or just take yourself off mute if you have questions for either Benjamin or Madison. All right, maybe some will come to you and we'll have some time at the end, I think. So in that case, Lisa, I'll ask you to go ahead and share yourself and your screen and tell us who you are, how you got there, what do you do, what advice do you have? Thank you so much for being here, Lisa.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me get my screen shared just so that you can have a visual aspect, because I would say as a cartographer, one of the things I am is a visual learner. I just wanted to say that Madison and Ben have so far made so many great points, and I feel like we could have a full discussion just on some of the stuff you guys mentioned. But maybe at the end when we have time, right? So my name is Lisa Berry. I am a product engineer at Esri, and just a little bit of background about myself. As Ben mentioned, I feel like most GIS people I know also have very interesting passions and hobbies otherwise. He's into music. I race cars with my family, and I really like my cat. So, you know, this is kind of just me in a nutshell, big on family and just, you know, enjoying life to the fullest. And I think that kind of builds into, again, like I said, people I know who are in the GIS field. They have passion and excitement in a lot of things that they do. I got my undergraduate at UC Santa Barbara, go Gauchos. I also had some strange majors. I majored in geography with an emphasis in GIS, but I also did business because why not, right? I mean, you're in college, get the opportunity. I was the geography club president, nerd alert. I interned for Michael Goodchild, doing volunteer GIS work, essentially like how can you have a map interact, how can people interact with the map to give their feedback? And again, I had highest honors and distinction in the major, nerd, which is a good thing, I will say. I then was really excited about GIS and Esri, and I was determined to work at Esri. So I heard of this program at the University of Redlands, the same place where Esri is based. And it's an 11-month master's program where half the year is courses and the other half is a project for a client. And I did a project with Python for Caltrans. So all of the roads that we have, they're managed by Caltrans in the state of California. So I had my introduction to the world of Python during my master's program. And I was lucky enough to have the hiring manager for Esri attend one of the sessions, give a presentation during our program, and I essentially bothered him until I got a job. Probably not recommended, but I had a little in from when he did that presentation, and that's when I found my way to Esri. I work on the ArcGIS Living Atlas of the World team, and a subset of that team is the Esri Maps for Public Policy team. I've been here since 2014, almost 8 years. And I used to be technically a cartographic product engineer. I'm now a senior product engineer, but they're essentially the same thing. I'd still kind of call myself a cartographic product engineer because at the end of the day, I get to make maps every single day, which I love. I make maps about demographic content. One of my main jobs is to create and wrangle data so that it's ready to use in the ArcGIS platform as just maps and content and data so that you don't necessarily have to go to the data source, but rather just start mapping things, analyzing things right out of the box. I've been able to accomplish some of that with automation via Python scripting. And so a lot of the data processing I don't even do by hand, but I'll get to that later. When I started, I would not have thought of myself as a cartographer in any way, shape, or form, but it is amazing what you can learn if you are willing to learn. So I was lucky enough to have some great mentors on my team, and now I would consider myself a cartographer. I also make story maps, dashboards, apps. I get to test new features in the product, and I get to write blogs and tutorials. So let me talk a little bit more about that. But ultimately, what is a product engineer? I've been saying that phrase. It's probably a little strange for some people. So essentially, at the end of the day, Esri makes a software, a mapping software, and we have different types of engineers that we have work here. I'd say the first is a software engineer. These are the developers who write that core code behind the scenes that make the product work. They're really the minds behind the operation, and we could not do anything without them. The other end of the spectrum is we have solutions engineers. They build things with the product for the use of customers to help either sell the product or help them, like I said, solve their problems. Somewhere in the middle there is a product engineer. Essentially, we're the jack of all trades that test the product, document the product, provide feedback to the developers as they're developing the product, and we also build things that end up in the product. So I like to think of myself as a jack of all trades. I'll use that phrase multiple times. I wear lots of different hats. So I'm a product engineer for the Living Atlas. But what is the Living Atlas? Well, it's GIS data and maps at your fingertips, like I said, built directly into the product. And so these are based off of different categories, such as imagery, boundaries, people, infrastructure, environment. And like I said, my emphasis is on the people category. I work mostly with census data. And when I first started at Esri, I started working with data that was created by our in-house team of demographers that create very detailed demographic data for the United States, as well as we work with a data provider in Germany, Michael Bauer Research, MBR, for global data. So at first, my job was to hand make hundreds of maps and manage hundreds of services. So my first year, I got already pretty tired of doing a lot of hand work. So I was lucky enough to meet up with a Python expert, and together we automated pretty much my entire job. So then it said, well, what now? And I said, my manager said, what do you want to do next? I said, well, I would love to present about GIS and our product to the people who use it. So Esri has multiple different events each year, one of which is the users conference down in San Diego. And I got to speak in front of 30,000 of my closest GIS friends, which I loved. And after that, it was a winding road of me continuing to present. I love to be in front of people and show my excitement and passion about maps and help other people be successful with their work. And now, while I still present all the time, whether it be in just small meetings or in sessions like this, I also do other work when it comes to the maps that I make. One of which is this website called the Esri Maps for Public Policy, where we take data and maps from federal agencies and help turn that into digestible maps and products that help people answer questions really quickly. We break this down by different topics and make it so that a non-GIS person can explore maps and get value out of them by simply just clicking around. And now this kind of touches on what Madison said. I work mostly in the online sphere. So all the maps that me and my team make are interactive, where you can click on it and maybe learn more. So if we want to know how many people responded to the 2020 census, we can see how that compared to the 2010 census. So we make maps like this where you can touch it and immediately get feedback. I also do a lot of other projects. For example, I work with this concept of environmental policy, more than just the people. How do people impact the environment and vice versa? Worked on one project last year where we did a spatial analysis on NASA CDAC data, which is essentially particulate matter in the air, to determine how this has changed over about 18 years. And so I was able to make quite a few different maps that helped portray this data in a useful way for an everyday audience, so that you can easily make connections like, why is the air quality so poor in the northern part of Italy? Well, maybe because it's being trapped by these mountains. Small cartographic things like that, plus the data processing, really can turn data into something digestible and usable by the people who need it. One of the other projects that I've worked on a lot is working with data from the US Census Bureau. I also used Python to automate the American Community Survey data, as well as the 2020 census data, into the ArcGIS platform so that no one has to join those tables from the census website ever again. I actually see that one of my teammates is on this call, and she was a huge part of this. The two of us essentially built out this data structure, and I would say that's one of my favorite projects I've ever worked on. We also do a lot of things such as working with other government data, such as the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and many others. So at the end of the day, I make maps, process data, write code, but I also do a lot of other things. I also get to test and promote the product because at the end of the day, we are a software company. So there's a lot of different mapping techniques called smart mapping styles when you're working in ArcGIS Online. And our team put together a whole collection of story map tutorials to help people learn not only how to use different mapping techniques, but best practices, and also to learn why these are important when you're making mapping style or different maps with these mapping styles. So this was a really cool project that we finished recently that really helps that feedback loop. We also get to work directly with the development team to say, hey, it would be really nice if the product did this. And like I mentioned earlier, we get to give that feedback to the developers and they take it and get to improve the product that we use. I also get to help announce new products and test them, such as the changed histogram experience in ArcGIS Online. You now have colors represented within the map and within the data histogram that you see. So I got to write blogs and work with the developers on that project. But at the end of the day, I am the most excited when I get to make applications, story maps, and dashboards using the different data that I get to work with, such as this example that shows how many people have been quitting their jobs in the United States recently. And now this is a really interesting topic that we may be hearing about on the news. I'm lucky enough to get to map that data, get it into our product, and create experiences like this one, which will eventually load because my internet is slow. But I get to help create these digestible pieces of information so that anyone, map expert or not, can understand and learn something, maybe to make a decision at the end of the day. I also do a lot of blogs and outreach. I have helped write Learn lessons on the Learn ArcGIS site. We have lots of different tutorials to help people get started and learn GIS. I also write a lot of blogs. This is something I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to do, because I would say when I started at Esri, I was not a person who liked writing. And I challenged myself when I started my job that I said, I'm going to write blogs. And now I have quite a few blogs and I actually love writing them. And I would say that that challenge that I gave myself was one of the most fulfilling that I've had in my career at Esri. I'm also lucky enough to do outreach and presentations just like this one that I'm giving you now. That's kind of familiar, right? And I am, again, so grateful for the opportunity to share my passion with the world. So I would essentially say my life as a product engineer is that I'm a jack of all trades, a data wrangler, a Python coder, a blogger, a presenter, and at the end of the day, also a cartographer. And to sum that all up, I am a geo geek, as probably many people on this call might be or want to be. And with that, I will say thank you for having me. I'm definitely open for questions, and happy GIS week, and ole, go Gauchos, UCSB.
Fantastic, Lisa. Thank you so much. It's clear that you're a lifelong learner as well, and I appreciate that you put up the Learn lesson. And your blogs have been fantastic. One of Lisa's blogs on relationship maps is required reading in my class, Applied GIS, because those students start that class not knowing how to spell GIS. And by the end of it, they're making fantastic story maps and dashboards. But what they're really interested, because they know about odds ratios and relationships in health data, Lisa wrote a very quick blog on relationship maps, which is essentially their on-ramp to know that you can have a public health background and get into GIS. So please go ahead, write your questions in the chat. We have a few minutes.
Oh yeah, just realized I forgot to make one quick comment, and I'm just gonna share it real quick before I answer that question in the chat. But it's simply that we do at Esri, if you're interested in participating, we do have student programs. So if you guys are students and interested in kind of getting a foot in the door or applying, we have a 12-week summer internship. So some GIS experience in this case is helpful. But we also do have a 1-week assistantship program at that conference I was mentioning. So I'll share this link with you all, but as a student, there are opportunities to learn more about Esri and become more involved. So sorry, I just had to put in the little pitch at the end.
Fantastic. And I see that Carlos, we do have one question, but I see first that Carlos put the exact blog that I was mentioning, your relationship net blog. So easy to read. And if you're coming, especially from public health background where you're thinking about relationship between obesity and diabetes, how can we represent that as a map? And Lisa will tell you in a clear and very concise way, which for students that get too much reading to do, concise is like the keyword. So thank you for that. So there's a question from Wenmei Liang. Do you have any course recommendations, general recommendations on transitioning from ArcMap to ArcPro?
That's a really good question, and I think we get that a lot. There's, I can help hunt for some maybe learn lessons on the topic. I believe we do have some tutorials that help with that transition. So I will hunt for those while the next speaker goes, and I'll put them in the chat for you.
Perfect. Yeah, there are some learn lessons on that transition. There's also some YouTubes from Esri presentations. So we'll go ahead with our next speaker. Of course, I'm on my iPad here and it crashed. So our next speaker, I'm in the wrong thing. Sorry, bear with me. Our next speaker is Warren Glimpse from ProximityOne. Warren, if you'd please share your screen and tell us who you are, how you got there, what you do.
Hey, greetings. Let's see. Hold on. As you can see, I was ready.
We're seeing your screen and it looks like you're hunting for the ProximityOne website. Fantastic.
Okay, I'm here. So, okay, thank you for having me. Have this opportunity to spend a few minutes with you. So this is the ProximityOne.com homepage, as you can see up here in the URL link. And I'll just, I want to just give you some navigation tips here before I get into my presentation. So down here in the ahead and updates, so you can pull up ProximityOne.com. You can go to this 1118 where we have today's session. So I had a session earlier on integrating using geographic and demographic data for decision making. So I'll just click that. It's a PDF, so you can download that PDF. It's about the earlier session. And today's session is focused on a history with the Tiger Digital Map Database and a career-oriented discussion around that. So again, you can click that link, a one-pager. I'm not really going to go into any of the links. This is just really a discussion of a chronology of my, in quote, very geospatial career. So let me go to that one. Sorry. Again, my name's Warren Glimpse. You can see my contact information down at the end of the PDF. So unlike many of you, I am not a geographer by academic background. I'm an econometrician. I got into GIS many years ago, having to do with my entry point was with Census Bureau data, really predating today's modern advances in machine readable data, WebGIS and the like. My earlier presentation talks about the products that we at ProximityOne develop, having to do with data extraction APIs, desktop GIS, and WebGIS. But this session is focused on just one area, and that is the Census Bureau's TIGER database. As you can see right here, the acronym TIGER, Topologically Integrated Geographic Encoding and Referencing, which has been around really since the late 70s or the early 80s. So this is a chronology I'm going to share with you and make some recommendations for those of you who are perhaps less familiar with TIGER. TIGER was initially the geographic backbone for Bing and for Google, and many of the errors that you can still see in those web-based online geography systems can be still traced back to the Census Bureau's TIGER. I started with really before TIGER. I developed the Columbia, Missouri GBF DIME file, which was then used as the prototype for the TIGER files. The TIGER files are the digital map database that the Census Bureau uses to largely collect and tabulate data from many statistical programs, including notably the decennial census program. But the TIGER has a life after the Census Bureau, and that is the public domain version of TIGER is the underpinning of not only the systems that I described, but also widely used in many GIS applications that deal with the official version for county boundaries, school districts, cities, places, census blocks for purposes of census or for 2021 redistricting and the like. So you can click the link on About TIGER today to see more detail about what TIGER contains. This is not a technical presentation on the structure or use of it in that regard, but really more of my history and what this can mean for you as those interested in careers in this arena. At the Census, so I was with the Census Bureau for a period of time. I was one of the developers of the State Data Center program, a widely known program now for sharing access to not only Census Bureau source data, but federal statistical data of all types. From the Census Bureau, I actually went to a federal statistical policy unit, but then I wanted to share with you that I was engaged with a project for the National Center for Education Statistics, where I developed the first national scope set of school district boundary files. So this was in the mid-90s when PCs and internet was just getting started. And now school district boundary files are a core part of the TIGER system. And in fact, there's a small staff who just focuses on interfacing, updating school district boundaries between participating states and the Census Bureau's TIGER system. Item 4, as I started the development of a desktop GIS software, which operates today as CVXGIS, first developed in the late 1990s. Again, it has a TIGER-centric orientation to it. Along with that period, I was and continue today to develop a wide-ranging proprietary demographic economic estimates and projections known under the name of Situation and Outlook. Beyond or parallel with CVXGIS was the development of the DD API. As Lisa was talking about the use of Python to develop and interface data sets, DD also operates in that same arena, demographic economic data and extraction. It is a wrapper plus, if you will, for the Census Bureau's API. It takes that API and does things through a user interface that most users find too technical to get involved in. It is really a gateway to the federal statistical system so that it not only operates with Census Bureau source data, but also other federal statistical agencies, notably Bureau of Economic Analysis and Bureau of Labor Statistics. So its role in life is to actually create those intermediate data sets, whether those data are targeted for use in GIS or otherwise. They're primarily subject matter data sets. So again, something like the population by age, by census tract. So those data are generated by DD, and then they can be moved into an Esri application or QGIS or CVXGIS, or the next topic, item 6, which is a system that we've also developed, which is VDA, Visual Data Analytics. It's a web GIS software platform. It's a gateway to the federal statistical system. And we develop and operate that through a partnership with a colleague company in Osaka, Japan. It's a device independent, web-based, requires only a web browser, nothing to install. So I have a long history with Tiger. Tiger, for example, why is Tiger important? Again, it's the underpinning of many GIS, digital map database applications. It's all geography. There's no subject matter in it. It includes, for example, 70 million street segments, roughly 70 million, which are intersection to intersection street segments. There are other companies in the US that deal with updates relating to Tiger. We do a little bit of that. But the opportunity to take a partnership development of geography through most all 50 states participate with the Census Bureau in sharing state developed and regionally developed geography in the form of shapefiles and other forms of geometric representation, and putting those shapefiles or geography into a standardized structure. So that rather than dealing with, say, a road street overlay in California and merging that with one in Nevada or Oregon, the Census Bureau does that in developing the Tiger system. And it's not certainly limited to linear features such as roads and streams, but polygons such as census blocks, counties, state legislative districts, congressional districts, and the like, as well as points of interest. What Tiger might mean for you, and kind of closing out a few comments here. I think it could mean a great deal. Probably you've all participated in some form of using Tiger. You might think of it in terms of career opportunities in developing advanced expertise in Tiger related applications. So I see great opportunities in developing some expertise in Tiger. So you put that on your resume. You have actually hard experience in using it. Certainly one area of opportunity is the Census Bureau itself. So not only is there a staff located in Suitland, Maryland, a DC suburb, but there are also geographies in each one of the regional offices. Did I say that correctly? Geographers in each one of the regional offices. So there are also federal agencies where the Tiger data is implicitly required to carry out a certain requirement for participation in a program and the like. There are also, so it's an employment advancement strategies opportunity. So developer opportunities also widely exist. Developing a background in Tiger applications is something that's very transportable into companies that deal in the area of GIS and otherwise. We are starting, we now operate a geospatial analytics web session every Thursday, where we have a thread that is in there that is focused on Tiger products, how they're accessed, used, and structured. So I invite you, use my contact information there if you like. Let me know of questions that might facilitate your geospatial career. And if I can help, I'd be glad to attempt to do so. Thank you.
That's fantastic, Warren. Thank you so much. And thank you for illustrating so well that someone can come from a educational background other than geography or some of the more traditional or classic and come into a career in GIS. So with that, our next speaker is Nancy. If you can go ahead and stop share. Warren, stop screen share. And then our next speaker is Nancy Verduzco from Erina Associates. Go ahead, Nancy. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. And
Okay, perfect. Oh, hello, everyone. So my name is Nancy Verduzco. I'm a tech coordinator at Erina Associates. So I actually got introduced to GIS when I was studying for my master's degree in anthropology at Cal State LA. I took a couple of GIS courses as electives and ended up loving it so much that I decided to pursue the graduate certificate. And so now I'm a tech coordinator at Erina Associates, like I mentioned, which is a public outreach and communications firm focused on stakeholder engagement in the public sector. As a tech coordinator, I work alongside our innovations team to implement a multitude of tech tools for a variety of transportation, planning, marketing, and construction projects. So Esri tools specifically, such as story maps, the hub, Survey 123, have all been fundamental strategies in how we approach public engagement. They have been key resources in how we collect public feedback, raise awareness, as well as informing and educating stakeholders about projects that are happening in their communities and around them. So as outreach consultants, we understand that it's really important to meet people where they are, meaning that sometimes communities might require certain language interpretation or a higher emphasis in traditional door-to-door outreach. However, as we all know and probably have experienced, navigating through a global pandemic has really pushed us all to lean into technology, right? So for what that looked like for us was that even though we were already heavily utilizing tech tools in our efforts pre-pandemic, we still had to get creative in how we transitioned our in-person events to the digital space. So as what I'm showing you on the screen right now is just our website, and just a quick plug here, we are actually hiring. So if you are interested, just go to our careers page and you can learn a little bit more about the opportunities that we have there. But let me go ahead and show you a few examples of the types of story maps that we have created for some of our projects. The one that you see here right now is for a project that actually already wrapped up, but this is what we use for a 5 multi-asset virtual public hearing. And so for this project, we had the purpose was to have a virtual open house leading up to a public hearing where people would have an opportunity to submit public comment on a draft environmental document. So since this happened earlier this year and we still were not able to have in-person events the same way that we probably would have traditionally in the past, we had to figure out a way where we can allow space and hold space for the community to still submit public comment while having the opportunity to review the environmental document and understanding the improvements that are happening in that corridor. So we use this traditional story map, which is a story map series, and embedded within it, we have story map journals. So this is a little bit more of an old school one. Lisa, I'm sure you know, but this is actually a fan favorite for a lot of our clients. And we start off with a welcome tab where I and the team created like essentially a tutorial for people to know how to use this tool. So within that, we wanted to make sure that everyone that visited the site would know how to navigate it and how to use the maps and everything. So what we did is we created some video tutorials where we have closed captioning in both English and Spanish, and it gives step-by-step instructions on how to navigate the story map. And within that, we also created instruction sheets where they can zoom in and click through and see how to use this tool on mobile and on their PCs or their computer devices. And just, I don't have time to go through every single tab, but just a quick overview is every single tab has a PowerPoint presentation that is accompanied with a voiceover that actually walks through different aspects of the project. So for example, this is a project overview. We have project improvements, and then the fun part, the mapping. And so part of my job is to also create some interactive maps, but in a digestible way where the general public or people from all walks of life, whether they are engineers or GIS experts, they're able to navigate these maps and understand what it is that they are looking at. And essentially understand the improvements or the impacts that are happening within the corridor of interest. And so what we do is we do something similar with the tutorials on how to use the story map, but a tutorial on how to use the interactive maps themselves. So we did that by creating this instruction sheet on how to use the different aspects and click around. And the thing is that it's important to not assume that people know how to use these tools, especially when you're doing public outreach and you're dealing with people from different backgrounds and different levels of expertise. So that was really important for us to have that so that people can be able to digest the information. And so if you wanted to click and learn about a specific improvement within the corridor, you just click on the type here on the left-hand side and it takes you to this one, for example, pavement class. There's a quick little breakdown here of what those improvements are. And then on the right-hand side, we have the interactive map itself where you could zoom in, look at what those layers are and toggle layers on and off depending on your interest. And so we provided this for all of the different types of improvements where people can just scroll and learn more about all of them in great detail. And then in addition to that, we had the environmental document tab where it actually had the environmental document itself and the environmental presentation. So you learn a little bit more about that background. And if you wanted to learn more about any sand walls that are being proposed, you can go under the sand wall tab and check out another interactive map there where we include the actual sand wall layer and then the parcels that are touching that sand wall, which would be the ones that would be affected. And to follow through, we have the submit comment tab, which is where people would come in and submit a comment electronically through this story map. But they also had the opportunity to comment at the virtual public hearing via Zoom. So this is one example. And let me show you another that we have, if time allows, just really quickly. So this is for the city of Los Angeles, or Valley Boulevard Mission Road Multimodal Improvements Project. And this one's a little bit different. It serves more as a tour where you can click on all of the improvements within that corridor just by even scrolling down, or you can click on the number. And so this one's a little bit more simplified, I would say. And then we also have corridor characteristics if people want to dive into it a little bit more and kind of geek out on like the characteristics within the corridor, you know, bike network, which turns on certain layers related to that, the bus network, rail network, land use, zoning, you name it, demographics. There's just so much that we can do with this. And we're a huge fan of the Living Atlas, by the way, because that makes our life so much easier when we are building things from scratch. And so, yeah, I think essentially this is what my day-to-day looks like as a tech coordinator. As far as advice for students, I would say to definitely take those courses that Esri offers. Those are really great in just getting to know the different types of products that they have available if you're interested in a career in GIS. And also just to do passion projects on the side, whether it's mapping if you go hiking or you go camping, you know, just do story maps about that, about your personal interests, and just learn how to use the tools. Thank you.
That's absolutely brilliant advice, Nancy. Thank you so much. Right. I mean, you could just go out and, you know, learn Survey 1, 2, 3 or field maps by doing, you know, looking at storm drains in your community and then take that over to the Public Works Department and say, hey, look, I've created a database for you of the condition of all the storm drains. This is where you need to focus. There's going to be potential flooding here, but I've fixed that for you. So that's brilliant. And the other thing that was so brilliant, Nancy, was in your demonstration there, sort of starting it with, this is how you navigate the story map, right? It's one thing to just put up a story map for the community, but I mean, we all know how to interact, but most people don't. So that was really critical and very valuable. I appreciated that. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. So if there are any, feel free to just take yourself off mute and ask any of the speakers a question.
Hi, my name is Matthew. Nancy, I had a question. The presentation, it's beautiful for those story maps that we saw. Do you all have like some kind of internal guidance on like best practices to show people who might not know how maps work? I noticed that there's not a lot of like variable names that you can see. Is there any advice you have for us along those lines?
Are you referring to the interactive map itself and the layers?
Yes, yeah. How to present an interactive map.
Yes, so it actually depends on the project, right? Some of them are a little bit more complicated and you can't really go without showing great detail because that's just the nature of the project. But we do work with a lot of engineering files, CAD files, so we have to convert them to shape files, something that's a little bit, and then clean them up a little bit because obviously you don't need the annotation and all of the other details that engineers tend to include. So when we deal with this, we kind of just look at the project holistically and try to break it down based on what information is actually the most important that needs to be presented. But then we also provide supporting documents like exhibits, so PDFs and that sort that do go into the nitty and gritty details about the improvements so that if you did want to read it and understand every little aspect of it, you can do that.
Great. So we're at time here, and I really appreciate everyone's participation, especially the speakers. I'd also like to thank our Zoom host, Michelle Tobias from UC Davis, and the helper, Janet Reyes from UC Riverside. Thank you all so much, and thank you for attending. Look forward to seeing you next year at UC GIS Week or sometime between now and then. Take care, everyone.